I would say at this point, there's probably less than 100 banks that are truly engaged, have gone out to an industry provider on the AI side and really started digging in on the
Welcome. Very exciting episode of Travillian Next. Got my friend here, Allan Rayson, one of the big innovators in the banking fintech world, going back to Encore Bank, before that Bank of Texas. He was founder CEO of a fintech, and now he's running his own consulting firm, Finov8r.
Yes, sir.
Finov8r.
I mean, that's a pretty original name, right?
It is, with the 8 in there. Love it. Yeah, Finov8r is a great name, man. I mean,
there is a bit of a backstory. There's a bit of a Kobe reference in all of that. Like, I appreciate the work ethic of Kobe, but
rest in peace. Yeah, that was a tough loss.
In the context of fintech and banking.
Yeah, no, it was great. Didn't know about the 8 and Kobe. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
work ethic and love it. So welcome, my friend.
Thank you.
We've been had a lot of conversations over the last couple of years. When you were at Encore, and now as you're branching out on your own and consulting, kind of my go-to for what's happening out there in the weeds of fintech and banking.
Yeah.
And being a consultant with the name Finov8r, we've talked over the last year or so, and you're working on a lot of interesting projects with a lot of clients. Today, we're going to focus on AI use cases, which I think is extremely important.
Pretty hot topic.
I think hot topic. It feels like AI stablecoin the first half of the year were the rave. And I think that's going to continue. But when it comes to community banks and credit unions, how do you harness this power of AI like the bigger banks are doing and the bigger tech companies? But we'll get to that. But what are some of the projects that you've kind of worked on since you founded your company over the last
absolutely.
year or two?
Man, I am getting retained a lot, really in the last kind of 3 months, specifically on the topic of AI use cases. The banks, there's as with anything, there's an evolution that's taking place in terms of people's knowledge of what this even is.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first to admit, look, I'm not an engineer. I'm not one of those people that that Meta offered 100 mil or whatever it was to join the team.
Like, whoever placed that person's having a nice July 4th.
I raised my hand, but for whatever reason, Meta didn't
as an
call
executive
me.
Recruiter, I was like, if somebody placed that person, they're having a very good July 4th.
That's a pretty good payday for someone.
Not bad.
And I am not one of those people, but what I do know about is how banks work and all of the regulatory environment, the process-oriented nature of the industry, the policy-oriented nature of the industry can certainly find my way through those types of things. So the banks specifically are reaching out, just seeking all the information that they can get in the context of what do we do with this? How do we?
That's what I was going to ask you. What are like the first questions that I'm a
literally
CEO of a $1 billion bank, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I call you up, and I know enough to like have a conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe I have ChatGPT up on my computer, and I use that.
Yeah.
What are those like first questions? Like, what are other banks doing? What is it? What can I do?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Generally, when they are reaching out, the topic is one of two things. What AI use cases are you, Allan, seeing in the market today? And then secondarily, like, we've made all of these investments in tech, fintech, bank tech, infrastructure, et cetera. like how do we monetize these investments?
Yes.
Because speaking firsthand experience, you end up with handfuls and handfuls of products, kind of point solutions that you've acquired over time to solve a certain problem or perhaps take advantage of an opportunity. But to answer your question, the banks want AI use cases as a mechanism to kind of get started, to educate themselves as to how to use it. And we can certainly jump into some of those use cases. And they need guidance and want guidance as to how to monetize these technology investments that they've made, whether it's a Q2 digital banking product or a Z Suite commercial deposit gathering product that they can leverage to raise deposits. Those are the two things that I hear about the most, especially in the last kind of first half of this year.
So, and we'll circle back to those use cases because I'm really interested in, if I was I'm not a bank, I didn't come from banking, I'm not an engineer, but being in business for the last 20 plus years, being an end user and just looking at a high level strategy, how do we harness this technology for efficiency to do things that we couldn't do before? You're not going to be able to go hire MIT data scientists if you're a smaller bank.
Well, maybe we start by tackling the elephant in the room.
Yeah. What is that elephant?
With the elephant being what's going to happen to this industry from an employment perspective.
Ooh, that's something we think about at Travillian very often. And if you read the news, you're in Austin, so you're already seeing driverless cars and a lot of things. So that's disrupting that industry.
Yeah.
We were talking about it before today. Microsoft laid off a lot of people because they're readjusting and using AI technology. So that is the big elephant in the room. People are scared to bring it up.
So here's my take.
What are your thoughts?
Here's my take, and I'm gonna credit some friends over at Whipley if in this conversation, but was with them the other day. In the context of like they do a lot of the valuation work for community banks to help them understand how to grow value either through traditional delivery of banking products and services or monetizing technology as a mechanism to grow value and create new revenue streams, all that stuff. So as you kind of think about this whole investment banking and capital markets and valuation aspect of this industry, that's what they do. But where I was going with that is they showed me a chart that showed back to 1990. I have no problem showing my age. In 1990, I was
feels like yesterday, and to me, I think you're about to say the same thing. In 1990.
I'm a bicentennial baby, so 1976. That would have put me as a freshman, I think, in high school in 1990. At that point, there were, I think, 14,500 banks and thrifts in the United States, and there was, as I recall, I'm going off of memory, but at that point there were 1.8 million, 1.9 million employees in the industry, something to that effect. Today, fast forward, whatever that is, 25 years. That's 35 years.
Really? Oh, wow. 25 years
that's a little painful to think about.
Which is painful to say.
So fast forward 35 years, there are 44 plus or minus 100 banks in the United States. And though that employment number has dipped down to, I think, 1.3 million, 1.4 million at some point, today it stands about the same place that it did back then. You've still got a couple million people employed, even though there's far fewer banks. There's about the same number of people that are employed in this industry. So are we going to see like widespread layoffs and just mass exodus out of this industry? I don't expect that personally.
That's good to hear.
Over the course of the last 35 years, like we've not experienced that in all of these different in this whole evolution. So
Yeah.
like that's the big elephant in the room.
Yeah. I feel like reskilling and learning how to utilize and enhance this technology is going to be the key.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Maybe getting away from redundant tasks.
Yeah.
Having the AI complete those, but being able to oversee the program and how do we utilize and then execute on this data or this information to drive value.
I think to take that a step further, as we think about this, right up your alley, so I definitely want your feedback. But like as you think about the org structure or the org design of a bank, right? You've kind of got you got your C-suite at the top. Those humans are only going to be improved by the use of AI and agentic AI. You've got sort of middle management inside of a bank that are running various lines of business, various functions. And then you sort of have, I guess what I would refer to as the work level or the worker level of a bank org. So you're talking about loan ops, deposit ops, treasury ops, et cetera. You're talking about your underwriters, your analysts on the commercial banking side, like people like that are very, very skilled in what they do, often performing repetitive tasks.
Yeah.
My expectation, AI is really going to change how banks operate, whether it's a community bank with 300 FTEs or JP Morgan Chase with however many hundreds of thousands of FTEs. I think that's where AI really touches the org in terms of people. But I think it's important to talk about all of this in the context of like the employment base has not run off.
No, that's great to hear. Those are great statistics. And
even through the GFC, I mean, great financial crisis was a massive problem.
Yeah.
And certainly we saw dips, but it came back. So all that to say, like that's probably a pretty good starting point for a conversation.
No, that's good to hear. That's good to hear because people are scared across all industries, but how is it going to affect banking? And I think like we were talking about, it's just going to be a shift in skill sets and and that's good. I mean, you want to be able to utilize this technology so you can add value for whatever you're doing, make it more efficient, be able to focus more on the customer than kind of the tactics behind the scene.
And that is exactly why, like, in the context of use cases, like we are seeing massive improvements in the context of a call center. So while community banks, and especially a community bank that's more focused on the commercial side of the business, they're not going to have huge sets of customers. They're going to have a couple thousand businesses that they work with. Whereas on the credit union side of the equation, even a $3 billion credit union could easily have 200,000 members or 300,000 members that they work with. So the tendency to run a call center is probably more. You're more apt to see that in that environment on the credit union side. But in terms of use cases, I mean, AI can play a huge role there because you've got inbound calls coming from the member of a credit union that needs help. They pick up the phone, they call. You've got an associate on the other side that's taking that call and trying to access information to be able to help that person. Where 10 years ago they were probably having to search, probably having to go actually read a PDF document or look up a job aid or something like that. Whereas now that associate becomes so much more effective in not only the timeliness of the response to that person that they're on the phone with, but like the quality of that response is likely so much higher as well. So complete game changer. In that
So are those
context.
some of the use cases you're seeing, like from your clients right now? Are they getting more? Are you starting do you see a trend where they're starting in certain areas or asking, is this the best way to kind of jump into AI? Like, from your opinion,
Yeah.
are they not sprinting, but are they starting to jog a little, just touching a few areas, whether it's chat boxes or call centers, before jumping to some of the bigger projects?
I think, and it's important to distinguish, as you and I both know, like taking the big banks, the $1 trillion institutions, or even the hundreds of millions of dollars or hundreds of billions of dollars of institutions, that's a whole different animal. A lot of capital there to be able to.
You can spend billions and billions on talent, on technology, and build it in-house.
That's right. Specific to my audience and kind of our audience.
Yeah, completely.
That 1 to 10, that 1 to 15, 1 to 20 billion in asset space, like that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I've only seen a few, it's changing every day. So we have this conversation a month from now and it's different, but I would say at this point, there's probably less than 100 banks that are truly engaged, have gone out to an industry provider on the AI side and really started digging in on the AI side. So you got partners like a Hapex, for example. I certainly know of them being here in the Austin area and have context as to what they're working on, but like that's changing every day. Banks are becoming more and more involved. Certainly if they're running a call center, there's obvious use cases there. On the commercial side of what we do, especially within the banks, we deal with heavy, like very policy, procedure, process-driven businesses. So we're all familiar with credit policies, whether they be commercial or consumer. We're all familiar with regulatory policy coming out of the FDIC or the Fed or the OCC, et cetera. Point is, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation and policy. You take like an SBA use case, for example. As a bank, I'm asking my commercial or SBA bankers to go interpret what could be hundreds of pages of guidance from the SBA to try to make a determination, should we or could we make this loan and still retain the guarantee of the SBA on this loan. So that like that interpretation gap is very real, and things get messed up there, which presents risk and ultimately could produce loss. In that context, the SBA is another great use case or example of where this is all being applied.
Yeah. Now, like my brain just starts thinking about all the different areas when I worked in the corporate world where this could be utilized with data and analytics and marketing and underwriting and fraud and all this analysis that is probably very, very redundant and labor intensive to allow the person at the bank to interpret and then execute instead of spending all their time kind of sifting through the data.
I think you bring up a great point, because one of the things that I talk about with clients, and I'm talking about bank clients, you've got to be able to distinguish use cases that live inside the four walls of the bank from what's going on with again, I'll use a local Austin example here, but if I'm a bank and I've partnered with Q2 for my consumer and commercial digital banking products, I need to know what is Q2's trying to solve all of these different, understand all of these different possible use cases for AI as well. So as a bank, not only what is my strategy inside my four walls, but how are my partners, how are my vendors
Yeah. No, that's what I
accounting
was going to
for all
bring
of
up.
this as well.
They're not going to build it in-house. You're not going to build this in-house.
Correct.
You're going to have to partner with the right companies. And I've spoken with quite a few AI, whether it's reg tech or bank tech, whatever you want to call it, that is utilizing AI to help with fraud, to help with BSA, to help with all these different things.
Yeah.
And their target audience is community banks. So you're going to have people who understand these programs, like you said. What is Q2 doing?
Mm-hmm.
What is Fiserv doing? What is a Mantle or somebody doing on their end that you can then utilize? Because they're the ones kind of building it out, but you're going to have people understand it and 100%. Oversee it.
Yeah.
And be able to explain it to the regulators and everything. So I think there's going to be a chief AI officer in every bank within the next 5 years. I could be wrong, but somebody who's
highly
overseeing the whole thing and understands how all the pieces fit together.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying is highly not only possible, but probable in the context of for years now, we've been trying to modernize the bank, modernize the tech stack of a community financial institution. But at the same time, sort of back to the people, we've got to think about modernizing the C-suites of these banks as well. So the C-suite largely still represents, and you're closer to this than I am, but my sense is that the C-suite of a community bank, $5 billion, let's say, still largely reflects what it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, a lot of them didn't come up through CEOs, didn't come up through technology or digital. A lot of them came up through credit or lending or
like how are we modernizing the C-suite of a bank to be able to account for all of these things as well? I'm a big advocate of a bank at least understanding, in a very like business-led environment, we make decisions based on what's going on in commercial banking, what's going on in consumer banking, mortgage, et cetera, like very business-led decision-making versus tech. Tech operates on a very product-led philosophy and mentality, very R&D. Let's evolve, let's learn, let's improve the product based on user feedback, data, et cetera.
Yeah.
Banks need to sort of adopt a bit of that mentality.
Have more. I had this conversation with a few people, product managers, having people who are overseeing the product, looking at the product, kind of, are we getting a return on investment? Are we seeing more customers? Are we seeing issues with the customer service? Really overseeing that product. And you don't see that in many smaller banks.
Yeah.
Chief product officer. Fintech side, you see chief product officer, you see product managers, and they're the ones who are out there kind of the CEO of their product, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
How are we doing on the marketing front? Or did we have good numbers? Are we seeing click-through rates or whatever that banks are not really looking at?
Yeah. Do I think that a community bank is ever going to be a 100% product-led org like a tech company? Not in my lifetime.
Yeah. But there's some middle there. There doesn't have to be Meta or Tesla, but there's something in the middle that you can have. I always say you're not going to wake up one day and go run the New York City Marathon. You got to first walk around the block a few times, and then you run maybe a quarter of a mile, then a mile, then a 5K, and then a half marathon. You're not going to wake up if you haven't been a runner and just go run the New York City Marathon.
That analogy plays, right? Because it is.
So walk around the block.
It's muscle memory. Mm-hmm. And today, banks haven't necessarily developed any muscle memory around technology and onboarding technology, monetizing technology. That there's not a lot of muscle memory that's been built in this industry Because
well, for so many years it didn't change, right?
All of this is relatively new. Somebody was telling me the other day, even if you look at, we were talking about Q2 earlier, even if you look at Q2, they're only 20 years old. Yeah. So in the grand scheme, like that's not that long, especially in the context of the contracts that get executed in this space, 5 and 7 year contracts. We've really only been through, call it 3 or 4 cycles of change here.
Yeah.
So it's exciting times and pretty early in the grand scheme.
Yeah. Yeah. You think about it, 25 years ago, the internet was still relatively new, but wasn't really being used as it is today. We didn't have the smartphone.
Yeah.
And now we have AI technology. It's just going to become and just think of how, can you imagine back in, I always bring this up, 1995, 1997, looking at the internet for the first time as a bank CEO and saying, oh, I don't want anything to do with this. This is not going to change anything. Nobody's going to bank online. Yeah. And then when the phone came out, nobody's going to use an app to do their banking and payments. Yeah. Now you're at the point that people are not going to use AI for, you can't say that. I mean, the evolution is happening. It's happening quicker. ChatGPT, it's fun. All this stuff is fun. But I think what's happening behind the scenes with efficiencies, and I feel like we're in the first inning with this. And
easily.
5 years, 2030, I have no clue what things are going to look like out there. I wouldn't be surprised if a robot is serving my dinner, and people are going to at first go this, but then the second time it's like, it's a robot. Yeah.
I mean, obviously the topic of use cases and in and around AI and agents, which I'm still learning about, like all of the different applications there, but my world has historically been commercial banking, but on the kind of on the periphery of commercial banking is treasury, cash management, money movement.
Payments,
I remember having to onboard new clients. We generally always lead with a loan, but then we're bringing treasury onboarding into the mix as soon as possible. But all the information that is needed to onboard a client from a treasury perspective, an agent can handle. All of the different repeatable steps that need to take place to onboard a treasury client, an agent can handle. There's so many different improvements that I think are right in front of us.
Oh yeah.
To be able to leverage.
And it's kind of what you said before, how the tech world looks at how do we make it better for the customer. If your end customer is the commercial client, how do we make their lives easier as a bank? Yeah. How do we automate a lot of things? How do we I don't even want to go down the road of stable coins and programmable money, because that could be another hour talk, and maybe we have another one. But
another conversation for another day, but definitely
whoever cracks that code and is able to help their commercial clients with smart contracts and payments and things like that.
Cross-border payments.
It's going to be really hard for somebody who's not. And then add AI into that and stable coins, and now you're humming along. Because to the end user, you just want a seamless experience. How can you make my life better? Easier, so I'm not at the office till midnight when I want to be home with my kids. And the institutions and the community banks and credit unions who figure out how to make that happen, while also providing that customer service and everything. It's going to be hard for the ones who don't to compete.
With the whole conversation started with, I'm not suggesting that we're resting easy from an employment perspective in this industry, but we certainly are going to have to be on our toes. But the reality is, there's historically been about 250 M&A deals a year in this country, and in this industry. You're talking about banks. There's historically been about 250 M&A deals, and we're getting back to that place. So all that to say, 10 years from now, by 2035, we're talking about 2,200 banks, 2,500 banks, not 4,500 banks. So what are the traits of those banks that not only survive the next 10 years, but really thrive, a lot of it definitely comes back to creating efficiencies, creating more scalable business models inside these banks, being able to leverage tech is kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah. It's crazy to think about if you look at the S&P 500 and the top market caps in the country. These companies, they weren't even around 20. I mean, Microsoft was for sure, but the Teslas and the Nvidias and the Facebooks, Meta, and Google's, Apple was around, but it wasn't really Apple. And if they would have stayed on course without Steve Jobs and all the innovation, they probably would have been bankrupt by now. They go back 30 years, and who are the biggest companies in the world? I mean, are they even? I mean, there's some of them are still around, others aren't. So you can't just sit there and hope. Hope is not a strategy. But banking, I love community banks. You love community banks. We want them to thrive, survive. We want them to be here in 2035. But at the same time, we both see, I think we come from that world of adapt. If you're not adapting, somebody is.
And
Chime is, Robinhood is. These companies are adapting and taking market share.
And largely, I mean, largely the bank's fate largely sort of falls into the lap of the cores, to be perfectly like blunt about it. I mean, a bank is only as good as the core 9 out of 10 times. So
that's the whole thing. It was good to see Fiserv offer stable coins. That was let's see if they can pull it off. But I'm just happy to see that they're thinking about that for their customers.
There's a lot of evolution that needs to take place, not only inside the banks, but the cores have to continue to evolve. And
that's where you need more competition within the cores too. You need the
potentially,
cores that are agile and adaptable that can compete with the big boys.
I definitely believe that.
But I would say the first thing to do is to call Allan at Finov8r and talk about AI, talk about other. Even if you don't know where to start, don't call me for that. Call me when you need the talent that you're filled. But start with Allan.
Allan at Finov8r.com, or just go to Finov8r.com and the rest will work itself out.
Yeah.